What matters most is doing the right thing in the moment that matters most.
In nature, the ocean has to go out and come in. When we are breathing, we have to breathe in and out, not just one way.
Does someone want to be helped? Does someone want to be heard? And does someone just need to be hugged?
There's plenty of help out there. You could go talk to ChatGPT and get help, but the other two are the most human.
I need to borrow the belief of a confidant in my life, of someone that I've got a deep relationship with, a deep connection with, someone that knows me, someone knows what's good for me. And I need to borrow it because I'm 50-50. And all I need is to go 51%. So they're giving me that 1% that matters most.
You're listening to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. I'm your host, Lori Seitz. This show exists because fine is a lie leaders tell themselves, and it costs them their people, their culture, and their impact. Every episode, a leader gets honest about what it really takes to lead with empathy, vulnerability, gratitude, and courage. I trust something in this conversation will stay with you. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Fine is a Four-Letter Word. My guest today is Jim Morris. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Did I pronounce your name properly? I'm kidding. Some people have names that are a little more difficult, so I just thought, just being funny. At least I make myself laugh.
I love it. Humor is an amazing thing. I love kicking it off like that. Let's go.
We have had a really good pre-show conversation, and then just right before I hit record, we're just chatting away. So I'm quite sure this conversation will be definitely one worth listening to. So just to give my listeners a little bit of background on who you are, what were the values and beliefs that you were raised with that contributed to becoming who you are?
I think the biggest thing that I remember, early on in childhood and, my parents continuously telling me is, help others who need help. And it sounds very basic, but I remember my dad sharing a story with me about, if you're walking down the street and someone needs the shirt off your back, right, for whatever reason, and you know that you have other shirts in your closet, in your house, at your home, give them the shirt off your back. And, I don't think it was so literal when he was saying it, but I remember we were literally walking down the street when he was telling me this. And that's always stuck with me, right? Share what you have, navigate a life with others to where if they need a hand up, pull them up. And in some cases, if someone needs a handout, give them a handout, right? And I think that's something that's always stuck with me. It's always been something that has proven time and time again to be worth it. And not so much for what I can get, but more so for what I can give. And I believe that giving is something that I always receive back, whether that's just the happiness and excitement and the emotion that brings me internally when I can give, when I can support, when I can be a resource to someone else. So that's something that's very important to me. And then I'll share one other thing with you that has been a very important story and scenario that relates to my values in my life. And I talk about it in my book. It's a chapter. But, when I was 12 years old on a Friday night, I had a friend over and we were, watching the Ninja Turtles movie and, popcorn and pizza. And we were in my bedroom and we were jumping back and forth from one bed to another, right? Probably something that we shouldn't have been doing, but we were.
But you're 12-year-old boys.
Yeah, we were living the good life. Ninja Turtles and pizza and, hanging out with a good friend. And I remember we were jumping back and forth and we went to jump and the lights went out. And at that time, there was a big boom. And it wasn't the boom of us hitting each other in midair, which was a reality, but something else happened in that moment. And, we did collide, we're crying, and my mom runs in and, takes care of us. And my dad runs out the front door. And what had happened in that moment, about 20 minutes pass, and we kind of calm down, right? We're crying, we're in the dark, we're like, what's going on? We're distraught. And about 20 minutes go by, and we're now walking out on our side porch, and my dad's on the porch, and the police are there, and he's engaging in a conversation with a police officer. And what had happened that caused the lights to go out was there was a car accident that occurred right out front of our home. And there's a long street, and it's, very higher speed limits, like 45, 50 miles an hour, goes for about 3 or 4 miles straight. It's called Boston Road in Massachusetts. And there's a turn right before our house. And there was a drunk driver who must not have been paying attention, and just missed the gas station on the corner, hit a telephone, and flipped the vehicle.
Mm.
And what I witnessed in that moment when my dad was speaking with the police officer was the police officer was kind of giving him some shit. He was telling him, you shouldn't have pulled the guy out of the car. We had another case recently where that person turned around and sued the person who touched them, and they had to pay their medical bills, and they lost everything. They lost their home. And in that moment, I remember my dad telling the police officer, I don't give a shit what you're telling me to do. What matters most is doing the right thing in the moment that matters most. And my dad pulled that gentleman out of the car. The car caught on fire, and my father saved his life.
Wow.
And that definition of doing the right thing in the right moment that matters most to someone, that's how I define integrity, right? And we live a life where our integrity is always being pulled and tugged and pushed and maneuvered. And that stuck with me. That was 22 years ago. And I talk about it in the book, but I also define how integrity has showed up over and over in my life. I did a timeline of my life, several months ago when I was in the process of writing the book. Um, and I did, 0 to 7 years old, and middle school, and junior high, right? And high school, and college, and post-college. And one of the core values and one of the most important things that continued to pop up in that timeline was holding the line of integrity, and also moments where I compromised integrity. And so that's very important to me. And I learned that, from my dad at a young age.
Yeah, that's really powerful. The question that came to my mind as you were talking about this value of giving is, how are you at receiving?
I think for me, early on, um, in my teens, in my 20s, I felt very alone. I had a great job, was making a lot of money for my age compared to others, graduated college, had a lot of friends, but I just had this dissonance to me and felt really alone, and felt very victimized, right? My parents were addicted to Oxycontin at 14, and I was very connected with them and then disconnected and had a lot of anger. So when people would give to me, I would push it away, right? I would never receive a compliment. I'd be like, I'd push it off. I would, hit my chest and say, I don't need help. It's me, myself, and I, right? And I remember listening to a song over and over, me, myself, and I. And that's kind of the life I lived. And when I finally was faced with, you know, one of the biggest decisions in my life, and had all of my money on the line, every dollar I owned, in a business deal when I was putting on my first big conference for entrepreneurs and business owners, and it wasn't going well as we were leading up. That's when I really said, okay, I need to ask for help and I need to receive what others are willing to give to me, right? And some of that was financial, whether it was sponsoring and promoting a company at the conference, but more importantly, it was people's time, it was people's mentorship, it was people's advice, and it was ultimately just people's support. I remember a friend who would call me and just say, "Hey man, just let it out, let go." And what he was doing was he was giving me space to be myself. He was holding that space. He wasn't solving. He wasn't fixing. He wasn't helping in a tactical way, but he was allowing me to be heard. He was allowing me to get out some emotions, some frustrations, and that was the first period of time where I was allowing myself to receive. And that was just, 4 years ago. So I lived a majority of my life not being able to receive.
Your young life. Well, it's a lot of people get stuck in that place of one not being able to receive, especially high achievers are so used to giving, giving, giving and not allowing themselves to receive or not accepting the help when it's standing right in front of them. And I was just talking to my concierge this morning actually about this whole concept of giving and receiving. In nature, the ocean has to go out and come in. When we are breathing, we have to breathe in and out, not just one way. We're not designed. And so this being able to give and receive is just the cycle of nature. And then to comment on your friend just allowing you to express and to hold space, that's what people really want. That's what they crave more than anything. But it seems like other people want to jump in and be like, well, you know what you should do. No, what you should do is just shut up and listen to me.
And that was a lesson that I had to learn personally too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about that in the book. I call it the Triple H method, right? And
Yeah.
what it is, our first response is always to help. But my wife taught me, she's like, I don't want a solution, right? I don't want to be helped. I just want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to express and tell you. And that was the first time where I was like, wow, I am completely messing this up. And I started to think about a lot of interactions and situations and scenario. And it's really those three H's. Like, does someone want to be helped? Does someone want to be heard? And does someone just need to be hugged?
Mm.
Right. And if you don't know, and this is what I teach and I talk about, if you don't know, you can frame and just openly ask that question, right? Someone is always like, well, people don't want to be hugged. And I was like, you'd be surprised if I
You would
just
be.
ask. I think one person has said, no, I don't, I'm not a hugger. I don't want to be touched. Right. And it was, and that's totally cool. But out of all the times I've asked, one person has said that. Most people are like, I really need it. And when you give them the hug, they let go, right? That's when they're, a lot of the time they're emotional, and those emotions can come out of them and they can feel through that in order to move to the other side, right? So just that touch.
We're biologically wired for that. And yet we live in this society that has so many people not what's the word I'm looking for? Like we just don't have the opportunity for it. When you spend so much time like working from home, working on your own, even working in a coffee shop, you're surrounded by people, but you're not touching them. You're not having physical interaction. And we're just, as humans, we need it.
Totally.
I don't think people realize how much we need it.
When you ask someone, rather than assume, right? And you're open, like, do you just need me to hold space and allow you to be heard and listen? I don't have to comment. I don't have, do you just want to let it out? Or you ask them, is it okay to, I have an idea. Is it okay to share how I could help? I don't want to push this on you or force this on you, right? But see how I'm entering into that engagement of conversation where I'm opening up the opportunity for them to tell me and for them to choose. And I think that's what allows us to connect much deeper. And if we can open up the channel to that communication, that person is going to feel valued. That person is going to feel heard. They are going to feel seen. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking to connect deeper. We're looking to have comfortable space and communicate and share and be vulnerable and real and authentic. And I think if you run through those three H's and offer up a solution, you don't have to have the answer,
Right.
right? You can just ask and they'll be glad to tell you.
Yes. And more often than not, the answer is going to be the second two, not the first, not the help one. It's going to be the hug or the what was the heard,
The herd.
heard or hug is what people want the most. There's plenty of help out there. You could go talk to ChatGPT and get help, but the other two are the most human. And when you were talking just now, it reminded me of an episode we published just a couple of weeks ago with Cindy Etler. And it was a really powerful episode. What saved her life was a teacher who acknowledged her as a human. She said it was the first time anybody ever liked her, was this teacher in her high school. And that's what, that acknowledgement of her existence as a human saved her life. And so you never know what just that simple act, it seems like such a simple and not really important thing, but it's so important.
And I think too, that's the beauty of connection and engagement and communication. And, the last chapter of the book, and I love this conversation, and I don't mean to keep referencing the book, but we're so aligned in having this discussion right now. But I talk about the impact effect, which most people will call the ripple effect, right? And you don't know how wide that ripple can go. You don't know that opportunity that you've engaged in can expand beyond them, can expand to other people. I just went on a hike with my 3.5-year-old this past Saturday, and every single person we walked by, whether they were running or jogging or biking or just walking, she smiled at them and she said, "Good morning." And the person who's focused and running, and maybe they're on mile 10, right? And I just watched their whole demeanor change, and they smiled at this little girl, right? And they're like, "Good morning," and "I love your backpack." She had this cute little backpack on, or "I love your dress." And I watch people brighten up and lighten up in a way. And maybe when they get done with the run, someone pops into their mind and they take that energy and they get on have a conversation and help someone else. Maybe they go get gas after this, and they engage with the cashier or someone else at the pump. And we just never know the expansion of that energy transfer and being the light in someone's dark moments. And for me, going back to my daughter, there was a moment in time where I was envisioning taking my life. I was in my kitchen. I had my eyes closed, and I was hearing the 4 beeps of my safe, the cold steel of, my Glock 17, putting it in my mouth, what that metal tasted like. And all of a sudden behind me, at the time, my 2-year-old, she says, "Daddy, God made you special."
Oh my gosh. I'm going to get tears now.
Who had shared that with that 2-year-old? Was it someone at the grocery store that leaned down and said that to her? Was it someone at the school? Was it God himself? Like who shared that with a 2-year-old and had a ripple on a little girl in a yellow sundress in the moment that I needed it most? And those thoughts vanished instantly, gone, right? And it was like, I've never had those thoughts since. And it was someone impacted her, which in turn saved a life. And that person may never know. They probably will never know of this story, you know?
Exactly, because it was probably something they said in passing and didn't even register. Did you know she was behind you?
I did not. So at first, and someone asked me this on a recent podcast, they said, "Do you think that was God speaking to you directly?" And I said, "I don't, because it was her voice. She was right behind me. Um, and I just hugged her and she smiled, and it and it was gone. Like, I was in it, right? I was a week before that rolling change at the kitchen table trying to buy diapers, thinking about just being married to my wife. And she this is not what I told her life would be like, and this is not the struggle we anticipated. And why did these backup plans and this investment and this $100,000 and this $100,000, and why is this person suing this person, and why can't I even go to the court case over this real estate deal because I have a promissory note with this partner and I'm not technically a partner in the LLC, right? And like, I'm just going through it and can't find a solution, and can't find a third way around it, and living in a state of being a victim, right? And that one message from her that someone shared with her at some point in time completely pulled me out of it, completely. And my life continued to change almost immediately after that. Almost immediately.
It's just astounding to me how she just happened to be there at that moment and to come out with that at that moment. I mean,
My wife was upstairs, like, why, and we've got stairs, so, and with a baby gate, so it's like she's downstairs in the living room with me, which we have the open kitchen concept, so I'm at the kitchen table with my back turned to the living room. I don't know if my wife was putting my son, my newborn son, down to a nap, I would assume, right? Like, she probably just took him upstairs real quick, put him in his crib, and it's just me and my daughter in that specific moment.
yeah. Wow, that's so powerful. Like that is just such a awesome example of how miracles work. I'm reading this book called Awe. I can't remember the subtitle, but it's about the science of awe and miracles and what makes people experience awe. And that feels like one of those moments where just, wow.
Life changing.
Yes, absolutely. Um, you had said something that I made a note of when we talked originally, and that was that when you don't have hope, you need to borrow belief. Talk a little bit about that and where that came from.
So for me, when I think back of all the big risks I've taken, right? Whether it's deciding to marry my wife, Caitlin, you know, and live a life with her forever, and investing $240,000 of all my cash into a 1-day conference, right?
What a
Or
one
do
day conference. Okay,
a
this is
one
we're gonna come
one
back
day
to that. All right,
conference.
go
Yep.
on.
Um, doing a TED Talk, right? Applying for the TED Talk, and then 3 months later having the thoughts of bailing on that TED Talk, right? Um, you know, starting a business, writing a book, helping authors publish and write their book, right? Like, all these different scenarios in my life, they're scary, right? There's a lot on the line. There's risk. You don't want to fail. You don't want to disappoint people. You want to support your family with the revenue and how you're helping others, right? So there's just a lot on the line. And every single time that my heart has pushed me to do something, I've I have been scared. I have wondered what the thought of what would happen or the outcome if it didn't go the right way or if it went sideways. And and I build backup plans, right? And I have other solutions and strategies because I like to calculate risk. And if this doesn't go right, like, so I'm not saying blindly running into the wall, knowing that it would hurt a little bit, but understanding there may be a solution to climb over that wall, right? And for me, it's always been someone, not something that that's caused me to follow and chase my dreams. And in those moments when I'm 50-50 on something, I need to borrow the belief of a confidant in my life, of someone that I've got a deep relationship with, a deep connection with, someone that knows me, that knows what's good for me, someone that can remind me of those situations and scenarios where my back was up against the wall and I fought and clawed my way out of it, and remind me of the scenario where I felt the same way I feel now, and remind me, what if everything goes well? What if everything is successful? What if you don't take this opportunity? What if you don't put one foot in front of the other? So for me, any big decision, any um, risk that I'm taking, it's a connection, it's someone, and in those moments I'm borrowing the belief and that they have in me, based on what they know about me, based on what I've been through, based on scenarios I've been in previously, based on where my heart is, where my passion is, and they're raw and honest and real. And there's been situations where they've said, don't do this, or, hey, take a step back, don't rush into this, right? So they're going to tell me the truth, whether it's what I want to hear or what I don't want to hear, but they're giving me the belief in myself, and I need to borrow it because I'm 50-50, and all I need is to go 51%. So they're giving me that 1% that matters most.
Yes. And I would imagine that sometimes you're not even 50-50. Maybe it's a little bit less in the belief department. But my question that as I'm listening is, what if somebody doesn't have that kind of person in their life? Because not a lot of people do have somebody who will tell them to go ahead with it. Like we were talking about before we hit record, about so many people have their own fears. And when they see somebody else doing something that makes them fearful, they kind of push those fears onto you. So you seems like have been fortunate and blessed to have people who will push you into what might be considered a scary situation because they have the belief. But what if a leader is listening and they don't have somebody like that?
I think, you have to understand, I think, what your network is today in order to build a network you want tomorrow.
Right. Or how do you find somebody if you don't already? Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I think, understanding who's a confidant in your life, who's an ally, and who's an acquaintance, right? And in one of the chapters, I call it a connection rep, where you draw a bullseye, and the small circle in the middle is the confidants, the bigger one is the allies, and the bigger one is the acquaintances. Because most people in your life is an acquaintance. There's a smaller portion that's an ally, and then there's your small circle that's a confidant. So for me, analyzing my current relationships, I do it every 6 months. I draw this bullseye, right? And I start to understand, okay, if I've got 3 confidants, right? My mom is always going to be an emotional confidant, a resource, but my mom is most likely going to tell me not to do something, to
Mm-hmm.
play it safe, to be careful, right? And I've realized that family, mom, sister, brother, cousin, is most likely going to limit your capacity because they want you to be safe. They want to protect you because of how much they love you.
Right.
Right. And then in a business sense, I have mentors who have gone before me. They've done the things. They can see the vision. They can see the market. They know my skill set. They know what I'm really good at. They know what I'm really bad at. They know what type of partner I might need to offset some of the things that I struggle through or are not my strengths, right? So if you don't have that person, start to engage and with people who you think could become that. How can you move the ally who may have started as an acquaintance, right? Then they move to ally. How can you move them into a confidant? And I think the first thing is really understanding if you align with them, really understanding how they can support you in what type of confidant and what type of situations or scenarios. I'm not going to ask someone who has never built a business for, even though they're a confidant in my life, maybe they could be a confidant in with marriage.
Right.
I've got a friend who's like, I've been married for 40 years. He's never owned a business. I'm not going to ask him, hey, what do you think the market cap is on a publishing company? Right? Like,
People have different purposes. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask him, hey, dude, I keep I keep falling into the scenario where I'm keeping score with my wife. Like, and it doesn't matter, but it's like, hey, well, I did this today, and you didn't do that the last time. And he's gonna guide me and say, dude, you don't keep score, right? You're in this thing together. You're one whole unit, right? And he's going to tell me a story of when he did that 20 years ago, and when he was thinking about separating with his wife, and he had a mentor and they told him this, and this is the conversation he had, and this is how he approached it, and he's so grateful and thankful that he addressed it early on before it became a bigger issue, and then they got divorced and separate, right? Those are the people you need in your life. But if you don't understand what bucket they go into, if you don't spend time on the relationships, the depth, maturing them, and learning how they fit into your life and how they can help you, and also how you can help them, right? It's a two-way street. You were talking about giving and pulling, so,
Giving and receiving. Yes.
and receiving. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that exercise of looking at who in your life are the acquaintances, the allies, and what was the middle one?
The confidants, your
The
small
confidants. Right. The
circle.
small
Yeah.
circle, the bullseye circle. That's why I was like in the
Yep.
middle of the circle. Yes. I love that exercise. Is that in your book too?
It is. And for me, it was, I do it every 6 months because it will change. People will come in and out of your life for different reasons, whether you're in a different season or they're in a different season, right? And it will ebb and flow, and things happen, right? We're humans. That's the beauty in it.
I know I've been presented with a similar exercise like many, many years ago. And now that you're mentioning it, it's like coming back to the forefront of my mind. And I'm like, okay, I want to go do this right after we're finished here, but I won't. But I mean, I have other calls, but I do want to do it. Like, I don't know, maybe this weekend, because I think it is really important to help you realize who is in your life. Like, we have so many conversations every single day, every week. And then time just goes by and you don't even realize who's in that whole ecosystem that you have, and who could you tap into at a deeper level.
I think you see a lot of things online right now, or social media, or wherever, that talk about, you need more relationships, you need more connections. And I'd like to combat that and say, you've got a great network. You're just not maturing it. You're not giving the time to the people that are already there. I did an exercise at an event one time where I said, I bet you have $1 million sitting in your text messages. And I called it the 5 Alive. Take your cell phone, right? Go to your text messages and scroll 5 times and stop. And whoever you land on, I bet you is a relationship that you can give to more, you can re-engage, you can love on deeper. And I bet you that they can either refer business to you, they may want to engage in business right now with you, they may advise you, guide you. I said, but you probably already have all these people sitting in your text messages. You just need to carve out time on your calendar to engage deeper and to follow up, and use, voice memos. Send people a quick note, not a 3-minute voice note. Okay.
Yes.
Don't do that, but a 25-30 second voice note with your energy and your excitement and what have you been up to and what are you doing? And
It makes
I'd
a
love to re-engage.
difference. Yeah.
It does. And I say voice memo because most people don't want to do a video, right?
Sure.
But voice memo is the easy way to get the energy transfer.
Yes, absolutely. And people don't think of it. And I 100% agree. All right. We are, I don't want to go all afternoon. We could, but but I do like to keep them to a time limit. However, said I was going to come back to this $250,000 you spent for a seminar. Tell me, just I can't let it go because I mentioned it and I know my listeners are like, wait, come back to that. Wait, what? You did what?
So I started doing networking events and created this concept, network not normal. It's a no business card zone, no pitches. Come hang out, ask people what they need, ask them about their dreams, their desires, what they're building. And I did that for a few years. And then in 2023, I decided to create a conference called Impact Effect. And I am the sole owner of that organization. And I invested $240,000 of my own money. And we did it in Nashville, right off Broadway. It was a 65,000 square foot venue. We had a VIP lunch. I served people filet mignon. We had 16 speakers. We had a happy hour. We had a VIP night the night before. And I just went all out and I had no idea what I was doing. Right. And um, that scenario, I was about, and I shared in the book, but I was about 34 days away from, the event happening. And my sales team left, my sponsorship person walked out on me. I lost a $30,000 sponsorship. And this is when I learned to ask for help. This is when I learned to receive, was in this moment. And I was driving from Boston to York Beach, Maine on a family vacation. And my wife was like, I'm tired. I'm going to get in the back seat with Ellie. And they both fall asleep. And I've got like 45 minutes. And I just asked God, I need your help. Like, show me, help me. What do I do? And I drove through the next overpass, right, where, there's a fence, and in huge styrofoam cups stuck in the fence, it said, ask for help.
What? That's incredible.
I just, lost it. I started crying, and that was the first time I asked for help, and I received it almost immediately. And then, I ended up selling 356 tickets in the next 30 days. We had, 400 people in the room. I spoke at an event, a month ago, and someone said, um, hey, before I start my speech, I want to take 5 minutes and I want to tell you about Jim Morris and how Impact Effect in 2023 changed my life.
Mm.
So that impact that had happened, that risk that I took, was massive. And it wasn't a financial success for me. It was an investment in learning. It was an investment in building relationships, building better teams, marketing. We hired a marketing company that produced no results. So I dove into marketing. I ended up starting my own marketing company that was successful. And it was a very transformative part of my life, and a very hard part of my life. I lost $112,000 on that one event. And that was the first really unsuccessful thing I've done leading up to that in business. And it hurt.
Except I'm going to challenge you on that term of being unsuccessful.
Financially.
Still, it was just the result. It was not the result you were expecting or hoping for. But as you said, you learned so much. You got so much out of it. So I would challenge the term failure or unsuccessful. It just wasn't the way you initially intended. Because I always want to reframe those words. People are like, well, I'm afraid I'm going to fail or it's going to be unsuccessful. What does that actually even mean? And so
it's a great reframe. It was a great investment. A great investment.
Right? We learn, or what is it? You what is that term? Like you succeed or learn? I don't know, something like that. But I think we need to reframe all of that. The whole definition of what success is, not success, failure, whatever. Okay. So we're at the point of the question of what is the song you listen to? Maybe it was the song you were listening to while you were going through all of this stuff, that gives you an extra boost of energy.
Um, the song "Spinning"
Spinning.
by Connor Price, it just gets me fired up.
Okay.
It's very motivating for me. I remember putting on headphones and listening to this song before that conference, before I was going out to speak. And what it did for me in that moment was it reminded me that everything can be spinning. And a lot of people said that I couldn't do this. A lot of people had told me to back out, renege on some negotiations, not pay the venue. And that bled back to integrity, right? I talked about earlier integrity. So I didn't feel an integrity to do that and bail on it. And a lot of people told me I shouldn't do it and I couldn't do it. So that song starts off with a phrase like that. And it just reminds me to keep going and keep moving forward. And if I'm doing it for the right reason, if I'm doing it to impact others, if I'm doing it to give people an opportunity to connect deeper, to be a conduit, to be a small, tiny piece of what they're trying to build or how to continue to navigate their dreams, then it's all worth it.
Mm, love it. We will put a link to that in the show notes so other people can listen to it and be inspired as well. And lastly, Jim, if somebody wants to continue a conversation with you or buy your book, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can buy my book on Amazon, Connect or Die: How to Survive AI by Jim Morris. You can go to realjimmorris.com. It has all my information and best way to get a hold of me.
Okay, cool. I'll put links to that in the show notes as well. Jim, thank you so much for joining me today on Fine is a Four-Letter Word.
Thank you for having me.
Wowza. Listening back over this episode with Jim Morris to pull out some key takeaways and realizing there are just several pure gold nuggets in this one. Both things you can do right now and others you can tuck away for when you need them. Here you go. First, give what you have, even the shirt off your back. Jim's dad didn't just say this to him, he lived it. He pulled a stranger out of a burning car after the drunk driver flipped it in front of their house. When a cop admonished him, warning him about liability, lawsuits, etc., his dad said, "I don't give a shit what you're telling me to do. What matters most is doing the right thing in the moment that matters most." That's Jim's whole definition of integrity. And he says it's been tested and pulled at every stage of his life since. Second, high achievers are often terrible at receiving. Jim spent his 20s living by me, myself, and I. He couldn't take a compliment, couldn't ask for help, hit his chest, and insisted he didn't need anyone. It took losing $240,000 of his own money on a conference after the sales team quit and his sponsor walked 34 days out before he broke. He was driving his family to Maine, everyone sleeping. He's praying in the car when he passed an overpass with a giant foam cups spelling out, "Ask for help." What an incredible message from what I'd call a higher power. That was the first time in his life he actually did ask for help. And he sold 356 tickets in the next 30 days. Third, before you jump in to fix someone, ask which of the three H's they actually need. Do they need help, to be heard, or a hug? Most people don't want a solution. They want to be seen. But instead of guessing, you can just ask. Jim's stat on the hug part is wild. In all the time since he started asking, exactly one person has said no to the hug. Fourth, you never know how far your impact travels. Jim was in his kitchen about to take his life, gun in hand, eyes closed, when his 2-year-old daughter said from behind him out of nowhere, "Daddy, God made you special." He has no idea where she heard that or when. But somewhere, someone said this kind thing to this toddler with zero idea what it would go on to do. And finally, when you don't have hope, borrow belief. He's got an actual system for this that involves a bullseye he redraws every 6 months. confidants in the center, then allies, then acquaintances. Jim leans on his small circle of confidants when he's 50-50 on a big decision. Sometimes all you need is someone else's 1% of belief to get you to 51. If this is what you get in less than an hour with Jim, imagine what's waiting for you in his book. Go grab it. And if someone in your life needs to hear any of this today, send them this episode. I'm Lori Seitz, and this is Fine is a Four-Letter Word. See ya next time.